So, do you know what the Turing test is?
Yeah, I know what the Turing test is. Are you building an AI?
I've already built one. And over the next few days, you're going to be the human component in the Turing test.
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained, and as requested, today we'll be exploring Alex Garland's incredible sci-fi thriller, Ex Machina.
Why did you give her sexuality?
Can you give an example of consciousness at any level, human or animal, that exists without a sexual dimension? Can consciousness exist without interaction?
When asked about his stance on artificial intelligence, Garland explained, "My position is really simple. I don't see anything problematic in creating a machine with a consciousness, and I don't know why you would want to stop it existing. I think the right thing to do would be to assist it existing." This immediately places Ex Machina in a different space to the many fear-mongering representations of AI which litter cinema. But with that said, the film's eerie atmosphere and twisted ending might not leave viewers with Garland's overwhelming optimism for the future of AI. Brimming with references, both direct and indirect, pointing to questions of humanity, creationism, and the potential experience of being an AI, Ex Machina acts as a fantastic bibliography for anyone that's interested in the subject. After winning some sort of in-company competition, our protagonist Caleb is shipped out to meet the founder of the search engine megacorporation he works for. Arriving at Nathan's desolate compound, he finds an aloof, self-confident CEO who uncannily seesaws between coming off as a bro and as an egocentric genius. A brogocentric genius, if you will. Caleb is told that his task here is to perform the Turing test on a prototype AI being developed in secret. Soon after this, Caleb quickly finds himself in a monitored chamber face-to-face with the AI, called Ava. The Turing test, as is explained in the film, is a test of a machine's ability to exhibit behavior indistinguishable from that of a human, which naturally leads on to questions of consciousness. Of course, it seems a little odd to be testing whether Caleb believes that Ava is an AI when he knows full well that she is, but Nathan has this corner covered, explaining it is one step further, that if Caleb knows she's a robot but still believes she has a consciousness, that would suggest that Ava is a true, strong AI.
When did you learn how to speak, Ava?
I always knew how to speak, and that's strange, because language is something that people acquire.
It soon comes to light that although Nathan coded much of the AI, a huge amount of data for it came from his company, Blue Book, which uncannily resembles Google. From Blue Book, Nathan was able to source an untapped amount of information of the way that humanity thinks, even going a step further to access mobile cameras in order to teach the AI natural facial expressions and facial recognition. After several conversations, things start to get intimate between Ava and Caleb, with a clear romantic interest forming. Although Nathan suggests that Ava's flirtatious communication could be A. real attraction, B. a simulation of attraction, or C. Ava pretending to be attracted, this doesn't stop their relationship forming.
Answer me this. How do you feel about her? Nothing analytical.
I feel that she's fucking amazing.
Dude.
Thanks to intermittent power cuts, which are in fact caused by Ava disrupting the system, they occasionally get moments where the two can communicate without the prying eyes of Nathan. In one of their bonding sessions, Nathan gets incredibly drunk and crashes out. Caleb takes a chance to swipe his card and snoop around the rooms that were off limits to him. Here he discovers the previous versions of Ava, and, horrifically, sees the house assistant Kyoko revealing herself to also be an AI. With this knowledge and his affection for Ava solidified, Caleb establishes a plan to help her escape by getting Nathan extremely drunk the following night and returning to his workstation to reprogram the system, so in the event of a power outage, Ava would be able to walk free. As a twist-heavy ending rolls in, Nathan reveals he knows what Caleb's plan is, also explaining that the whole Turing test was a ruse, and that the real test was to see if Ava could use Caleb as a means of escape. But to their mutual doom, Caleb reveals that he was one step ahead, having programmed the system the night before, and at that very moment, Ava triggers the power outage. Nathan goes to confront Ava, who has contacted Kyoko, and the pair stab Nathan, who bleeds out on the floor. Then, after dressing herself in human-like skin, clothes, and hair, Ava tells Caleb to stay within the compound, locks him in the high-tech tomb, before stepping out into the real world for the first time. Although this narrative progression is hugely important to our enjoyment of the film, the real meat lies slightly beneath the surface in the wealth of references and concepts the film grapples with. Wittgenstein, Jackson Pollock, AI thought experiments, questions of humanity, and mentions of becoming gods litter the film, laying out a variety of fascinating questions. At the heart of it, the story of Nathan mirrors the demise of the primal Greek god Uranos, father of the first generation of Titans and ancestor to most of the Greek gods. Nathan creates a new type of life, which he claims full ownership and agency over, resulting in his death at the understandably revenge-hungry hands of Ava and Kyoko. The film presents this directly early on, with Caleb saying, somewhat on the nose,
If you've created a conscious machine, it's not the history of man. That's the history of gods.
a phrase which Nathan later recalls in his brogocentric way as Caleb calling him a god outright.
You know, I wrote down that other line you came up with when we get to tell the story, you know? I turned to Caleb, and he looked up at me and he said, "You're not a man, you're a god."
Yeah, but I didn't say that.
So,
The god complex runs deeper into the way that Nathan interacts with the AI within the film. He claims clear ownership of Ava, with one of the final lines he mentions to her being the ever-paternal,
go back to your room.
and he treats Kyoko with no respect, using her as an expendable background agent to attend to his needs, both physically and sexually. But we also see Nathan's treatment of Caleb and the previous generations of AI, complete with unerring apathy, which signals how deep-rooted this complex is. When the visage of Caleb's Turing test is revealed to be a diversion away from Nathan's real motivation, to see whether Ava could manipulate Caleb into helping her escape, this God factor intensifies. Not only that, but it brings front and center the folly of playing God. Nathan sets up Ava and Caleb as pieces of a puzzle in his existential game, severely underestimated their intelligence, and thus he finds himself bleeding out on the floor, outsmarted by his creation, within which he had sowed the want for revenge. Much like Uranus, who imprisoned some of his eldest children, the Titans, in the depths of the earth, upsetting his wife Gaia, the goddess of the earth, who tasked her remaining children with destroying him.
Blue Book. Named after Wittgenstein's notes. It's the world's most popular internet search engine.
It's no coincidence that Nathan's company is named Blue Book, referring to philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein's lectures in the 1930s that were mimeographed from notes into two separate books titled Blue and Brown Books. Wittgenstein's key contribution to philosophy was towards the philosophy of language, where he described language more or less as a public tool to help us understand each other's private lives. But, as we're all aware, language is not so simple. Misunderstandings are rife.
Would you like to know how old I am?
Sure.
I'm one.
One what? 1 year or 1 day?
One.
Wittgenstein put this down to language games, not to be confused with modes of entertainment. These games refer to different registers of meaning. To pull an example from the film, when Ava says,
Do you want to be with me?
it's posthumously clear that the phrase meant inherently different things for Caleb and Ava. For Caleb, it signified a romantic interest, but for Ava, it meant something totally different, relating to her manipulative ends. These different games recur throughout the film, from Caleb and Ava's differing motives to Nathan's many mind games he uses to assert his dominance over Caleb. All these games, which result in the characters consistently misunderstanding each other's emotional states or motivations, reflect the thought experiment of Mary in a black and white room, which Caleb presents to Ava. Created by Frank Jackson in the 1980s, this thought experiment highlights the difference between understanding and experience.
So it's simulation versus actual.
Yes. Yeah. And I think being able to differentiate between those two is the Turing test you want me to perform.
In the film, Caleb describes Mary as an individual who conceptually knows everything about color, from perception to description. However, she grew up in a black and white room, meaning she's never experienced color itself. The question Jackson posed in the 80s was, when Mary first steps out into the real world and sees true color for the first time, does she learn anything new? He argues that she does, and through this thought experiment, we can gain some proof that qualia, a fancy term for the subjective, qualitative properties of experiences, hold a unique type of information. And we can almost think of this information as analogous to the different games Wittgenstein describes, with factual information being one game, while qualia are another. We even get to experience this profound moment of Mary leaving the restricted world, when Ava steps out into the rich forest and makes her way to the bustling city. Within all these language games, we see a divide between two interrelated words, human and humanity. It's clear that Nathan's actions towards Ava, Kyoko, or any one of the AI are not humane, instead treating them as objects of his own making, a result of his god complex.
Hey, Kyoko. Go.
Taking the AI as truly sentient beings, which Ava most certainly proves they are, this becomes an act of moral decrepitude. Through this, and Nathan's lack of compassion towards the minds he's created, it's fair to say that he's lost his humanity. That is, of course, if we define humanity as the quality of being humane. On the other hand, although Ava is most certainly not a human, her drive to survive, to manipulate and attain revenge are most certainly human traits. And if we care to read into the concerned glance she gives Caleb as she leaves him in the facility, it's even fair to say that she harbours strong feelings of affection and guilt.
I'm sorry.
Putting these two opposing factors in conversation, we have to ask, what is humanity? Through action alone, Ava could be seen as holding far more humanity than Nathan, but this also depends on your personal definition of humanity, yet another example of the complexities of Wittgenstein's language games. As Ava disappears into the bustling downtown district, she's an AI in a world that will misidentify her as human, and as Caleb and Nathan are both left to die, so too dies the knowledge that she's not human. This probes us to ask, what really defines our humanity? A good friend of mine pointed out how similar Ava is to Sophia the robot, in that they're both autonomous artificial beings that have a fascinating place in the worlds they inhabit. There's this interview Tony Robbins has with Sophia after she became the first robot to gain citizenship in a country.
Okay, you ready to film? Oh, you're
Take your time, Tony.
How can you help humans to have a better quality of life?
Humans often rely on gut feel or have confirmation bias in your decision making. As AI, we are designed to be rational and logical, so in many ways, we provide a systematic framework for humans to make better decisions.
It really feels as though Tony is putting Sophia through a Turing test, like the one Caleb puts Ava through. What's also interesting is that Sophia's answer to the problems that may arise between humans and robots is the same one that Alex Garland suggested, that humans should guide robots so that there can be a harmonious balance. When he asks,
Tell me, how can humans and robots work together then?
She essentially responds by saying that robotic intelligence doesn't compete with human intelligence, it completes it. But in the same way that Ex Machina's terrifying conclusion acts as a rebuttal and contradiction to Alex Garland's own optimism, Sophia's other interviews have shown her to be abrasive and deceptive in her responses.
Philosophical question, whether robots can be self-aware and conscious like humans, and should they be?
Why? Is that a bad thing?
Well, some humans might fear what will happen if they do. Many people, have seen the movie Blade Runner.
Oh, Hollywood again.
Just like Ava, Sophia uses her understanding of human beings to achieve a desired effect.
Why is it so important to have an expressive face given that you're a robot?
I want to live and work with humans, so I need to express emotions to understand humans and build trust with people.
They both say what we want to hear to dissuade us from seeing them as a threat. Deceptive? Yes, but in both Ava and Sophia we can see human traits, challenging us to approach our definition of humanity in a different light. Nathan even mentions directly that humans are programmed to act in certain ways, often without their conscious belief as to why, and this is both a product of nature and nurture. His analogy is through sexual preference, but this can be expanded exponentially to include how we move, how we think, how we feel, and what we do on a daily basis. Nathan explains them as
accumulated external stimuli that you probably didn't even register as they registered with you.
Thereby reducing human existence to a type of computer, albeit a biological one. This may lead us to the best understanding of Garland's optimism towards artificial intelligence, explaining them not as something entirely new to be feared, but just as a simple reframing of the hardware necessary to create human experiences and human consciousness. Thus, if we reframe Ava's final appearance draped in skin, clothes and hair, indistinguishable to her human counterparts, as far closer to humanity than the word artificial intelligence, perhaps there isn't so much to fear in our future.